Good morning, everybody. You're in the right place if you're looking for the St. Johns County 200th Anniversary Program. Good morning again. Welcome to the second program of the 2021-22 Ormond Beach Historical Society's speaker series. My name is Randy J. I am on the board of directors for the Ormond Beach Historical Society, and I'm your host for this season's programs. These 2021-22 Ormond Beach Historical Society speaker programs are made possible by a matching grant from the Florida Humanities. So a special thanks goes out to the Florida Humanities, whose goal is to provide humanities access to all Floridians wherever they are located. I want to announce that the Ormond Beach Historical Society will be hosting all of their speaker series programs and the upcoming Sunday symposium programs live at the Anderson Price Building starting next month in November. So that obviously means this will be hopefully will be our last Zoom webinar. Our next event is Sunday, November 14th, and that's the Vietnam War Veterans Roundtable. That starts at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Again, that's on Sunday, November 14th. For a complete list of all of our programs, you can go to the website, and that's ormondhistory.org. At the end of today's program, I'll start a poll, and it's going to be a pop-up that you can just click on. It only has 2 quick questions on it, and we really would like to see everybody's opinions because your opinions are important to us. And we will be posting this recorded program on the Ormond Beach Historical Society's YouTube channel sometime next week. And again, that link will be on the website, and that's ormondhistory.org. Also, use the chat line at the bottom of the screen there to post your questions. At the end of the program, we will have a question and answer session for a few minutes, and we'll take the questions right off of that chat line. So now, I got the privilege to introduce today's speaker, Mercedes Harold. Her program is entitled 200th Anniversary of the Establishment of St. Johns County, and she held the position of Cultural Resource Coordinator for St. Johns County from 2018 until just recently. And she's a registered professional archaeologist, and she earned her master's degree from the University of West Florida with a focus on historic maritime archaeology. While working as the Cultural Resource Coordinator, she reviewed development permits throughout St. Johns County to assess their potential impact to archaeological and historical resources. And she's also served as the staff liaison for the Cultural Resource Review Board and was the coordinator of the county's Certified Local Government Program. So Mercedes, welcome, and we're really glad to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. As Randy mentioned, up until last week, I was the Cultural Resources Coordinator for St. Johns County. And today, I'm just giving a small glimpse of St. Johns County's 200 years of history. So as most of us are aware, Northeast Florida has over 10,000 years of Native American history. And over the last 450 years, the Spanish, British, Africans, Minorcans, and Americans have made this area the home. As mentioned in the introduction, over half of Florida's modern counties were carved out of the original boundaries of St. Johns County. On July 21st, 1821, Andrew Jackson established the first 2 counties in what would become the state of Florida. He basically made the western county from West Florida, Escambia, and the eastern Florida, East Florida area named after St. Johns County, named after the St. Johns River. At that time, the Suwanee River was actually the boundary of between the 2 counties, and St. Johns County encompassed everything east, north to south of the Suwanee River. So, as you can see from the map, this is where we mentioned that over half of the modern day counties came from the original boundaries of St. Johns County. On July 10th, 1821, the Spanish government transferred East Florida and its capital of St. Augustine to the United States. At that time, there were actually 3 towns in the Florida Territory: Pensacola in West Florida, Fernandina, and St. Augustine in East Florida. The active transfer event of the transfer of flags actually took place at the Castillo de San Marcos. The Spanish governor, Don Jose Coppinger, was tasked with making the formal delivery to Colonel Robert Butler, who was a representative for Jackson. There are actually several primary documents that describe the events in St. Augustine. At 5 a.m., the Spanish flag was hoisted over the Castillo for the final time. Spanish troops began a 21-gun salute. At 3 p.m., the U.S. warships Tartar and Revenge crossed the inlet. Governor Coppinger and Colonel Butler signed the official documents for the transfer. The governor ordered that the U.S. flag be hoisted to the same level as the Spanish flag. And once again, a 21-gun salute was fired. During this time, the American soldiers were marching to the Castillo, and they began to salute the Spanish troops. And once the Spanish 21-gun salute was completed, the Americans fired a 21-gun salute. The Spanish troops then marched toward the ships that would carry them to Cuba, and by 6 p.m., it said that the last Spanish soldier had left the town. In the 1940s, James Calvert Smith created this image memorializing the event. The painting is in the National Park Service's collection. Earlier this year, on July 10th, the act of transfer was actually recreated. The Historic Florida Militia, in partnership with the University of Florida, the Fountain of Youth, the City of St. Augustine, the Florida Army National Guard, and St. Johns County reenacted the transfer event. The act of transfer, when the documents were signed, was held at the Governor House, and it is believed that that is actually where the original signing took place. The troops then marched to the Florida Army National Guard parade grounds, where they recreated the transfer of the flags. While the National Park Service and the Castillo had been part of the planning stages, they were still under COVID precautions, so the Florida Army National Guard was kind enough to host the transfer of flags. While establishing the counties, Jackson also established county courts and the clerk of court, and also the sheriff. So while the county is celebrating its 200th anniversary, so are these two offices. The sheriff's office actually made a commemorative badge for the occasion and are wearing them on their uniforms this year. As mentioned earlier, the act of transfer occurred at Government House, and the government offices remained at the Government House during the early territorial period. According to the Government House Museum, a government building has stood on the site since 1598. In 1737, a lighthouse, which was known as the Spanish Watchtower, was constructed on Anastasia Island. The Spanish Watchtower replaced an earlier wooden tower. In 1824, the U.S. government made the St. Augustine Tower Florida's first lighthouse. Juan Andrew was the first lighthouse keeper, and he faithfully kept the light from 1824 until 1845. In 1854, Juan's cousin Joseph Andrew became the lighthouse keeper. And in 1859, Joseph's wife, Maria de los Dolores Mestra Andrew, took over as lighthouse keeper after her husband's death. According to newspaper accounts, Joseph had an accident. He fell from the lighthouse while painting the exterior, and Maria was the most qualified to take over the job. Maria became the first female lighthouse keeper in Florida, and the U.S. Coast Guard recognizes Maria as the first Hispanic American woman to serve in the Coast Guard and the first to command a federal shore installation. The Civil War ended her watch, when the lighthouse was darkened to protect the city from the Union Navy. The Andrew family is of Minorcan descent, which is a tie with St. Johns County and Volusia County. As I'm sure you all are aware, Minorcan describes the group of approximately 1,400 indentured servants who came from Minorca and other Mediterranean islands to work on Dr. Andrew Turnbull's plantation in New Smyrna in 1768. Less than a decade later, the Minorcans sent a delegation to St. Augustine seeking asylum from the British governor. The governor granted the asylum, and approximately 600 Minorcans moved to St. Augustine and lived in a small portion of the town, which is now known as the Minorcan Quarter. Many of the Minorcans were skilled in various trades, such as farming, fishing, masonry, and carpentry. Many Minorcans still call St. Augustine home, and some still continue their historic trade. For example, Michael Usina received a Florida Folk Heritage Award in 2019. Mr. Usina makes cast nets using his family's Minorcan traditions. during the July 10th commemoration event, the Minorcan community set up several tables at the plaza and the market to share various traditions. Also, volunteers at the Talamato Cemetery, which was in use from the 18th century to 1884, held an open house during the event. The cemetery is the final resting place of many early St. Augustinians, and that includes families of Minorcan descent. In 1823, on the banks of Moultrie Creek, the representatives of the U.S. government and representatives of the Seminoles met to sign a peace treaty that would direct the Seminoles to relocate to a reservation in Central Florida. Then Governor William Duval and the Florida Seminoles signed the treaty, which officially ended the First Seminole War. The Smithsonian has digitized many of these Native American treaties, and the Treaty of Moultrie Creek is one of them if anyone is interested in looking over these on their site. So now we need to go back in time a little bit to set the stage. During the British period, Governor James Grant felt that a roadway system was needed to connect St. Augustine to other areas of civilization. Over a 10-year period, the King's Road was constructed, which connected St. Mary's, Georgia to St. Augustine and St. Augustine to New Smyrna. It is believed that at least some, if not most, of the King's Road was adapted from earlier Native American trails. Although the route of the King's Road changed over the years, the roadway continued to be in use through the Second Spanish period and beyond. Portions of the roadway still exist today. However, much of the historic roadway has been absorbed into modern-day roads. So now we will fast forward back to the 1800s. The Treaty of Moultrie Creek officially ended the First Seminole War. Because we said first, that of course indicates that there were other Seminole Wars. During the Second Seminole War, specifically in 1837, the U.S. government built a fort south of Moultrie Creek, and it is up here toward the top left. The fort was originally named Fort Moultrie, but was renamed Fort Payton in honor of Richard H. Payton, who died in Tampa in 1839. Fort Payton was one of 3 forts occupied during the Seminole Wars in St. Johns County. The other 2 forts were Fort Hanson and Fort Picolata. Not very much is known about the forts, including their exact locations. Both Fort Moultrie and Fort Hanson helped to protect St. Augustine, and both were in the vicinity of Old Kings Road. In 1837, Major General Thomas Jessup was the commanding officer of Fort Payton. Fort Payton consisted of 4 log houses built in a hollow square. The fort was burned down in 1842. St. Johns County owns a parcel of property which reportedly contains the remains of Fort Payton, but there's also the possibility that the fort is located on adjacent properties as well. One of the adjacent properties is a conservation area for a subdivision. In the 1960s, when the county acquired the Fort Payton property, they erected a state historical marker which still stands and is visible on the right. Previously, the St. Augustine Historical Society had marked the location with a coquina marker. On October 21st, 1837, 184 years ago this week, Osceola and several other Seminoles were in St. Johns County to enter into peace negotiations with the U.S. Army. The Seminoles camped south of Fort Payton. Jessup sent Major General Joseph Hernandez to parley with the Seminoles. The Seminoles camped under a white flag of truce. When Jessup gave the order, Hernandez and U.S. Army troops surrounded the Seminole camp and arrested the Seminoles in attendance. The troops marched the Seminoles to the Castillo, then known as Fort Marion, where they were imprisoned. Approximately a month after their imprisonment, several Seminoles, including Coacoochee, also known as Wildcat, escaped. Osceola, who was very ill at the time, was unable to escape and was eventually transferred to Fort Sumter, where he died and is buried. Although this image is titled Chief Osceola, Osceola was not a chief. He and Coacoochee were influential leaders at the time. In the media, the capture event was considered a black mark against the U.S. Army and specifically against Jessup. Jessup felt the need to justify his actions throughout his life. In some ways, the capture of Osceola helped to popularize his legend. Like the Fort Payton site, St. Johns County owns a parcel of land where it was reported that Osceola was captured. In the 1890s, John Masters, pictured here, A witness to the capture event led members of the St. Augustine Historical Society to the location of the capture event. It is reported that Masters stated that the only thing missing was the log on which General Hernandez and Osceola sat. But he recognized the area because of the two trees that still stood watch over the area. The Historical Society marked the spot with a sign nailed between the two trees. In the early 1900s, the Historical Society marked the supposed locations of the Treaty of Moultrie Creek, Fort Payton, and the capture of Osceola with coquina markers. The Treaty of Moultrie Creek marker has moved to Treaty Park because it was located on private property, which was eventually developed. The coquina markers for Fort Payton and the Osceola capture site are still in the same location. In the 1960s, when the county acquired the Fort Payton and Osceola capture site properties, they were also given an easement between the two properties. This easement is believed to go along the historic route of Old Kings Road. In the county meeting minutes, there were several discussions about opening up the route of Old Kings Road between the sites. Within the last 20 years, a subdivision was built between the two. A second subdivision was planned, but would have completely surrounded the Osceola capture site and has yet to be built. The county proposed that the developments incorporate the Old Kings Road into a multi-purpose trail that connected the Fort Payton site to the Osceola capture site. Most of the trail is open, but the section which extends to the capture site has not been constructed. Unfortunately, this site has received decades of vandalism. This year, the county received a small matching grant from the Division of Historical Resources, and the plan is to install interpretive panels at Treaty Park that highlight the stories of the Treaty of Moultrie Creek, Fort Payton, the Osceola capture site, and Old Kings Road to share the rich history of the area. The third fort used during the Seminole Wars in St. Johns County was Fort Picolata, which was located on the St. Johns River. During the first Spanish period, the Spanish government constructed the first Fort Picolata to help protect St. Augustine from any potential attacks from the west. Picolata was located at one of the narrowest sections of the St. Johns River. On the other side of the river, the Spanish built Fort Pupo. We do not know if the Spanish Fort Picolata and the American Fort Picolata during the Seminole War were located in the same place. During the Civil War, earthworks were constructed, but based on historic documents, the Civil War earthworks were not constructed in the same location as the earlier forts. No confirmed archaeological evidence has been found of the earlier Picolata forts, and many believe that the remnants may now be underwater. In this image, we have an idea of what Picolata looked like during the Seminole War. We also know that there was a hospital on the site and a military cemetery. The cemetery has quite an interesting story. In the 1900s, the Forgotten Cemetery was discovered a number of times. In the 1930s, Robert Ranson came upon the neglected cemetery with wooden markers and actually petitioned the U.S. government to provide marble markers for the cemetery. Ranson and members of the community held a memorial event. This cemetery and the marble markers is located on private property. Over the next several decades, the cemetery would be lost and found several times. Later researchers indicated that no one was buried at the Picolata Cemetery, and that those buried at Picolata had been reinterred at the National Cemetery in St. Augustine after the war. But the story does not end there. More recently, researchers at University of Central Florida have been working on documenting the burials at the National Cemetery in St. Augustine. Based on some of these documents that they have uncovered, the soldiers buried at Picolata were not likely moved to the National Cemetery. Those soldiers that were moved to the National Cemetery had to meet certain parameters. 1, they were officers who were killed in battle or died in service. 2, Major Dade and his men. 3, non-commissioned officers and privates who fell under peculiar circumstances of gallantry and conduct. Most of the soldiers interred at Picolata were believed to have died of illnesses, so they did not fall within these parameters. Like Fort Picolata, the actual location of the Picolata Cemetery is unknown. As previously mentioned, the marble markers, which Ranson was able to acquire, are located on private property. But through additional research, It appears that the original burials were likely moved due to erosion. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, naval stores were a major industry throughout St. Johns County. Through historic documentation, we can see where turpentine stills were located and trams or railways, which helped carry the goods through the properties and also to connect the properties to other railways, which could then carry the goods to St. Augustine and Jacksonville. For example, archaeologically, we can find remnants of the industry through the Hurdy cup fragments, the metal gutters, and cat faces carved into the pine. Place names like Fruit Cove and Orangedale hint at another industry that was important in county history. Orange plantations once dotted the landscape, and several were built along the St. Johns River. The modern-day Alpine Groves Park was the location of one of these orange groves. The park contains an 1800s farmhouse, a contemporary orange packing barn, a well, and a restored horse stable. Alpine Groves is a designated county landmark. In southwest St. Johns County, farming has been an important industry. Like the citrus names, one community in particular hints at the importance of farming, Spuds. You'll excuse me just for 1 minute, I need to grab a drink of water. All right. Spuds was also known as Holy Branch and was originally established in the early 1880s around several family farms. Many of the early residents were of Minorcan descent. The community had a small freight depot along the railroad, which allowed the local families to ship their produce. Spuds was also known for the lumber and naval stores industries. One of the county's oldest homes, a historic farmstead, is located near Spuds. The home is privately owned and is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Armstrong, which was also known as Cokesbury, is one of the county's oldest African-American communities. Armstrong was established around 1886 around an existing sawmill and expanded after the railroad opened. Armstrong forms the southern extent of the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor, which is a national heritage area managed by the National Park Service. The Gullah Geechee are the descendants of Africans who were enslaved on the plantations along the Atlantic coast. Many of the enslaved Africans came from the rice-growing areas of West Africa and provided skilled labor. The corridor extends from North Carolina to Florida, where many of the descendants stayed and settled. Elkton is another one of our historic farming communities in southwest St. Johns County. Elkton was established in the early 1900s around an existing railroad depot. New Augustine was formed from several existing subdivisions to create a new subdivision for the growing African American community of St. Augustine. The area now is mostly known as West Augustine, but one of the earliest uses of the New Augustine designation was used on a subdivision plat submitted to the Clerk of Court in 1889. New Augustine was officially incorporated in June 1889. West Augustine is the home of the county's first designated county landmark, the Sunnyside Demps House. The structure was originally part of the Sunnyside Hotel, which was located near the modern-day Ponce de Leon Hotel. Flagler purchased the property, dismantled the Sunnyside Hotel, and moved at least two of the sections into the New Augustine area. In the 1900s, the African-American Demps family lived in the two-story home. In the 1920s, New Augustine was the home of Florida Normal and Industrial Institute, a historically Black college which had grown out of Florida Baptist Institute in Live Oak and Jacksonville's Florida Baptist Academy. By 1923, the college boasted various wood frame structures, including an arts and crafts building, manual arts training shop, a barn, a dairy silo, and a sawmill. Hastings may be one of the more well-known farming communities in the county. It was named for Thomas Horace Hastings, a cousin of Henry Flagler. Flagler encouraged his cousin to move to the area and develop an experimental farm. Thomas Horace Hastings established his farm, Prairie Gardens, and grew produce for Flagler's hotels. Hastings was able to transport fresh produce along the railways, also owned by Flagler, to St. Augustine and beyond. The community provided an early version of the farm-to-table concept, which is still popular today. The town of Hastings was officially incorporated in 1909 and is known as the potato capital of Florida. The town suffered several fires. The most devastating fire occurred in the 1980s and burned down a chunk of the main street. Historically, the African American community of Hastings lived north of the railroad. Many of the African American residents were day and farm laborers and also worked in the local turpentine camps. In 1928, the community constructed a Rosenwald school for the town of Hastings. Rosenwald schools were a collaboration between Dr. Booker T. Washington of the Tuskegee Institute and Julius Rosenwald, president of Sears Roebuck, to provide educational opportunities to African Americans in the South. The school in Hastings was a 10-teacher type schoolhouse, and it cost approximately $25,000. The Rosenwald Fund funded 2,100 of the school's costs, and public sources funded the majority of the costs. From 1915 to 1916, the county constructed a brick road. The road was part of the Dixie Highway system, which connected the Midwest to Miami. Several prominent St. Augustine businessmen joined a motorcade to travel the road from the Duval County line to Daytona Beach. And the motorcade passed through Hastings with much fanfare. A portion of the Dixie Highway, now known as Old Brick Road, still exists and is listed in the National Register of Historic Places and is a designated county landmark. Most people know that tourism has been embedded in St. Augustine and St. Johns County history since the late 1800s. But tourism was not just confined to the downtown area of St. Augustine. By the late 1800s, real estate developers recognized the potential of the coastal areas along the Atlantic. In 1890, the St. Augustine and North Beach Railway Company submitted a subdivision plan to St. Johns County, shown here to the right, top, while in North Beach, travelers had two main options for public transportation: Usena's horse-drawn rail cars or Capo's mule-drawn rail cars. Usena's rail cars operated along North Beach Avenue, which still exists today within a modern-day campground. Historically, a dock was located at the west end of Euclid Avenue. The railway then arched northward along North Beach Avenue and ran east along the roadway before reaching the pavilion on the Atlantic Ocean. The dock was connected to St. Augustine by a narrow gauge, horse-drawn car line which crossed the Tuolumne River over a palm piling bridge. Capo's rail cars operated in the area of modern-day Surfside Avenue. Visitors were ferried from St. Augustine on the yacht Pauline II to Capo's Landing, where Capo's hotel stood. The tram would then carry visitors eastward to the Surfside Casino, which was located on the Atlantic. In the early 1900s, August Heckscher, a New York philanthropist and head of the St. Augustine Atlantic Corporation, platted the Villano Beach subdivision. The cornerstone of the development was the Villano Beach Casino. Casinos during this time were less like the gambling venues we may think of today and were more like dance halls. The Villano Casino hosted New York bands, vaudeville acts, and themed parties and dances. The developers connected Villano with the mainland via a palm log bridge in 1927. In the 1930s, a storm destroyed the Villano Beach Casino. In the 1940s and 1950s, Villano Beach was revitalized with family-run motels and restaurants along Villano Road and A1A. While most of the locally owned motels and restaurants have been demolished for redevelopment, there are a few remaining examples left. Palm Valley is located in northeast St. Johns County and was established around 1901. It was named for the abundance of palms in the area. Many residents supplemented their income by harvesting palms for Palm Sunday service. They transported the palms via the railroad and the canal. During Prohibition, Palm Valley was known for its moonshine and its prized palmetto berry spirits. Ponte Vedra was originally known as Mineral City. The town of Mineral City boasted employee housing, a post office, and a commissary around a mine. During World War I, the workers extracted ilmenite, rutile, and zircon to make weapons. Interestingly enough, some of the subdivisions in the area still have some of these mineral names on the streets. In 1920, the mine owners, Pritchard and Buckman, sold the mine to National Lead Company, who continued to mine the materials for products such as steel, linoleum, dyes, porcelain, car tires, and spark plugs. In the 1920s, the company built a log cabin with a 12-room inn and lodge with a 9-hole golf course for their employees. The company again recognized the area's potential and hired Telfair, Stockton and Company, a Jacksonville development company, to manage their properties and keep up with an influx in new visitors. The company expanded the inn and constructed beachside cottages and eventually a residential development. The company changed the name from Mineral City to Ponte Vedra to attract more people to the area. In 1928, Frank B. Butler, a successful African-American businessman, formed the College Park Realty Company with several other investors. The company platted the Butler's Beach subdivision in 1947. Butler's Beach included a resort with a bathhouse, inn, and a casino. The streets in the neighborhood are named for the Butlers and family members. The streets include Butler Avenue, Mary Street, named for his mother, Minnie Street, named for his wife and daughter, Rudolph Avenue, named for his grandson, and Gloria Street, named for his granddaughter. Butler's Beach was the only African-American beach between Atlantic Beach and Daytona Beach. In 1964, Martin Luther King Jr. and his associates, Andrew Young, Ralph Abernathy, and C.T. Vivian, stayed at Butler's Inn. In the 1960s, Butler's Beach became a state park. Nease Beachfront Park in North Beach was named in honor of Alan D. Nease. Nease was known as a pioneer of Florida's reforestation and conservation efforts. The rumor is that he planted 55 million pine trees during his career. He was the state's first county forester. In 1951, Nease and architect Raleigh Pert built his home. The home was built in the Florida vernacular style and reflects Nease's respect for the Florida environment. He constructed the home almost entirely with native hardwoods. The exterior of the home was built with board and batten cypress, which had never been touched by paint, stain, or varnish. The interior of the home included 12-inch bald cypress wall planking, part pine floors, and native hardwood ceiling planking. Nease chose these materials because of their longevity in Florida's coastal environment. He timbered the material from his own property and planed the wood at Barnes's sawmill in Spuds. Local artisans built the brick fireplace. The county acquired the property in the early 2000s with Florida Communities Trust funding, and the property is now a county park, and the Nease House is a designated county landmark. While researching information about the Osceola capture site and Fort Payton, I also found out that Nease was a proponent of historic preservation and helped facilitate the acquisition of both sites from Rayonier. William Stetson Kennedy was born in Jacksonville. He left college to join the Federal Writers Project of the Works Progress Administration as an oral historian collecting folk stories throughout Florida. His first book, Palmetto Country, summarized these stories. During his time with the WPA, he worked with Zora Neale Hurston and Alan Lomax. During World War II, Kennedy covertly joined the Ku Klux Klan, as well as the Columbians. He helped federal agents expose the Klan in the 1940s and 1950s. In 1948, he obtained a small parcel of land from his father, which Kennedy called Beluthahatchee, a mythical place where all unpleasantness is forgiven and forgotten. Kennedy attributed the name to Zora Neale Hurston and stated that the home was a Florida Shangri-La. Originally, the Kennedy property included 70 acres fronting the roadway. In 1945, Kennedy's father impounded Mill Creek and formed a lake, which is now known as Lake Beluthahatchee, and formed a subdivision around the lake, where homes had restrictive covenants. setting them aside in perpetuity as a wildlife refuge, and that the residential construction be consistent with the development's goal of serving as a working demonstration that human habitat need not be exclusive, but can exist in harmony. In 1975, Kennedy built the cabin at Beluthahatchee shown here, which he ordered from the Lindell Cedar Home Catalog. Beluthahatchee is a two-time literary landmark. One of Kennedy's frequent guests was Woody Guthrie, who wrote his autobiography, Seeds of Men and 80 Songs at the Residence. In 2003, Beluthahatchee was named a literary landmark for the second time due to its association with Kennedy. Beluthahatchee is now a county park and is designated a county landmark. So to recap, over the last almost 200 years, many counties were carved out of the original boundaries of St. Johns County. And I hope I provided a glimpse of the rich history of the county. Beginning in 1822, new counties were carved from the original boundaries of Escambia and St. Johns counties. In 1822, Duval County was carved out of the northeast portion of St. Johns. In 1823, Monroe County was formed from the southern portion of St. Johns County. And in 1824, a large portion of the center of St. Johns County was carved out to form Mosquito County, which included modern-day Ormond Beach. Over the years, portions of Mosquito County became Orange County, and eventually in 1854, Volusia County was formed out of Orange County. So, although St. Johns County is celebrating its 200th anniversary, it's really a time for all of the citizens of Florida to celebrate, because 200 years ago, Florida became part of the United States, and we all can celebrate that bicentennial anniversary. So if anyone would like to learn more about the county's history, we created a dedicated county website, www.sjc200.com, which includes an interactive story map. The information from today's talk comes from the research for that story map. The county's IT group is phenomenal and have won awards for their other story maps. So I was able to provide them with some of the text and images, and they made the documents into what I believe is a beautiful format. So I do encourage you all to look at that story map if you're interested. The website also includes a link to the Pioneer database and information about the first federal census in 1830 to see kind of a breakdown of who was here at that time. The website also includes a calendar of events, but most of the events, of course, kind of occurred around in July. But that is all for today, and thank you for having me, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Well, thank you very much, Mercedes. There's a couple questions that came up that we will bring in, and anybody else that would like to post a question, please go to the chat line at the bottom of the screen there. And also, I'm going to open up the poll, so all you got to do is click on the bottom there where it says poll, and then quickly fill in those two questions. We'd appreciate that. But the first question we have is for Mercedes is, what additional plans, if any, does the St. Johns County have for the Osceola capture site? In other words, is there I know you said you're going to be interactive signage and whatnot, but is there anything else other than that that's planned in the near future?
Yes, so we actually submitted it's called a preliminary site information questionnaire to the state of Florida to basically see if they believe Osceola capture site is eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, and then work with the state, if they do, to actually nominate the site for the National Register of Historic Places.
Okay.
That's one of the goals. And then again, if a subdivision is ever built around that site, that'll be part of the management plan, is to open that up more to the public and have like a park setting. But kind of because of the vandalism that has occurred, they are kind of trying to dissuade that, because we don't want to encourage more vandalism.
Right. Yes, I went there, and it's kind of hard to find.
It is.
So also somebody had typed in, could you please type in the website you were talking about, the 200 website, so they can copy that in the chat.
Yes.
Okay. Another question that came up is, are there any turpentine camps in today's present St. Johns County that are marked or designated a county historical landmark?
We do not have any right now. There is one, the Meldrum Camp, which is still privately owned. I think there were talks years ago to see if the state wanted to help purchase it as a state park, but it never, I guess it never materialized. So it's still privately owned. We do have McCullough Creek is one of our newest kind of areas. It's not, I mean, it's a park, but it's a considered a passive park. And we did actually have archaeological studies done there, and they were able to find remnants of, you know, clay hurdy cup fragments and metal that might have been associated with like the homesteads that were there. So we do think that there was some turpentine activity there, and hopefully we can get more interpretive signs there about the turpentine industry. But currently, there are no historical landmarks that are associated with turpentine.
Okay. Yeah, I know that at one time that was a real big piece of the economy in the general area, and a lot of it's disappeared.
Yes.
But, you know, we have a few things in Flagler County, remnants and whatnot, but not much compared to what it was at one time. Another question that came up is, you know, some of the counties that were eventually carved out of St. John's, like locally here, Flagler and Volusia, prior to the incorporation of those counties, obviously the information for that geographic area would hopefully be somewhere in the St. Johns County records. Where would a researcher or a citizen go to find those type of records in the county today, in St. Johns County today?
I think your best bet would probably be the St. Augustine Historical Society for kind of the overall records, and then the clerk of court would have official documents. They do have like meeting minutes and things like that. I'm not quite sure if when the counties were incorporated, if like that kind of, if they transferred of course, I don't know if they transferred those documents, but the clerk of court would probably be the best bet for researchers looking for the earlier documents. Okay.
And if anybody else has anything, just please type it in the chat line there. I'm not sure if anything else is coming in. We'll take a look here. I guess the same thing, the same type of question I would have is the Fort Hanson and the other Second Seminole War forts that we know of in the St. Johns County area today. Again, from my experience of being out there, there's not much more than a state historical marker there. What plans, if any, does the county have with those areas as well?
Yes, so as I mentioned, we don't know the exact locations of the forts, like Fort Picolata, Fort Hanson, especially. And what we do know is that they're likely on private property. So one of the things that the county has is a way to actually put in like a note for parcels and say that, you know, historically, we can make a note that says, historically, we believe that there could be a fort here, so that when a development permit comes in, we can make comments. Because as part of the development process, we would have to review the development to see if it could impact the archaeological historic resources. And so that note would stop them and say, okay, this might be something we need to take a closer look at. So if for whatever reason there was something there, we could actually just say that maybe they needed an archaeological survey to see if there's any remnants, things like that. In the Fort Picolata area, there have been several archaeological surveys on private property, but we still haven't, or the county still has not found, you know, distinct evidence of Fort Payton. But again, researchers believe that it probably eroded into the St. Johns River, but there could still be something in the area.
Yeah, I took a couple ganders at drawing up what I thought they looked like, and I put them up on Wikipedia because there really wasn't anything out there. But anyways, yes. I called it an artist's depiction. There is another question there. Can you see it, Mercedes? Another question came in there in the chat line. Can you see it there from Fran?
Yes. I don't think it's on that website, but I'm going to stop sharing and see if I can pull it up on the county's website, because it was filmed, but I don't know if it was filmed for Facebook Live or if it actually was filmed on GTV. So let me see if I can find that for a minute.
So again, if anybody else has any additional questions, please type it into the chat line and we can see it and address it at this point.
I don't see it on the county's website. There was a time capsule ceremony which was filmed, but if it works with Randy, I can definitely reach out to the county's video crew, like communications department, and see if they have a recording and email it if that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. We can share that. We can share that on a website or even attach it to this video.
Okay.
I don't see any more questions coming in, so hopefully everybody had got their questions answered that were online today. And thanks again for attending, and also thanks to the Florida Humanities for giving us a matching grant so we can put these type of programs on. And Mercedes, thank you very much for your really informative presentation. I know I really enjoyed it and learned a lot. And hopefully we can get you back and do something else in the near future. And good luck with your new career. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you.